Good morning and a warm welcome to all the viewers. This is me, Dev Surbi, on Democratic Dialogues. And today I have with me a very special guest, Advocate Santosh Paul, who is a senior advocate from the Supreme Court. Welcome to you, sir.
Welcome to all of you, and thank you very much for inviting me to your show.
And so, sir, right off the bat, I wanted to, quote from your article that you've written for Bar and Bench recently, um, that the people of the country and their judicial authorities can neither access nor assess the integrity of the software which is controlling the voting machines. This subjects us to suspicions and accusations of manipulation and fraudulent election results. So, in light of this, what is so shrouded in mystery about EVMs? Constitutionally speaking, why is verifiability so important for impartial elections and ultimately democracy?
See, at the time of the framing of the Constitution, one of the illustrious members said that the elections should be like Caesar's wife above suspicion. See, in order to give legitimacy to an election, it is absolutely essential that it should be above suspicion. That was the reason why the people who made the Constitution, designed an election commission, designed a election system where there is neutrality, there is absence of political partisanship in the process of election. Because otherwise, constitution or constitutional democracy has no meaning unless the people can see for themselves that this is an election which is held impartially, where every shade of political opinion can contest for coming into administration and working with the people. So it is very important that the public should be able to examine every aspect of the election process, which unfortunately EVMs simply have failed to do. And given their design, given the technology, I don't think this is an answer for a democracy.
Okay. So, building a little bit on this, the fact that, you were speaking about the structure of the EVM, the control unit, and,
Yeah.
the VVPAT junction, and how the software, you've also spoken about how much of a black box it is. So, can you speak a little to that fact? And again, how is that against democracy?
EVM is based on a black box technology in the sense, fundamentally, we do not know how this is functioning. Everybody has a general notion that I press a button, it records a vote, and that vote ultimately gets counted. But the point is, no person is able to assess whether that EVM machine is rigged, which is a very important factor. When these matters were argued in court, we were on the last occasion, by then the Pegasus has already come into play. The possibility, now I have this phone switched off, the ability to switch on the audio, switch on the video in a off condition of the phone is a possibility under Pegasus. The recent war which is happening in the Middle East has shown that you can virtually explode a device
Yes.
500 miles away. And to say that an EVM machine cannot be rigged or hacked into is, I think, being very, very naive. Now, the reason why the German Constitutional Court struck this down was on a fundamental principle. The question was asked, how do we know that this EVM machine is rigged or not? Can we find out whether it is rigged? It is the judges asking the lawyers. The lawyers said, no, you cannot know it. Can the public know whether this equipment is rigged? They also cannot know. How will you know it? The only way it was explained to the court is a set of experts will examine the EVM. That is why the German Constitutional Court said public examinability. Public examinability is fundamental in a democracy. It is important that the public should be able to assess whether this is a free and fair election or not. You cannot call in experts to assess whether an equipment is rigged, whether the equipment sided with some political formation or party and gave votes in that direction. If the public cannot examine it, it is not a democratic process. It is a very threat. It is a very existential threat to a democracy. And that is why the German Supreme Court struck it down. And which is why, in almost all technologically advanced countries, which can easily afford EVM machines as a cheaper means to execute an election, chooses to follow the ballot box method.
No, absolutely, without a doubt. And to speak to you about also what you've just said, I personally think the point you made in your article was so succinctly put that if any citizen or even someone from the judiciary is not able to examine uh, the technology without the help of a technical expert, then it just does not stand, right? Because
It has no legs
in
to stand on, as the one of the great members of the Constituent Assembly, K.M. Munshi, said. People should know that this is a free and fair election. They themselves should be able to see it. This was thought of at the time of framing of the Constitution. It's not a new concept. It is a concept which has run through all these years to sustain a democratic constitution, a democracy in a country. You need public examinability. And this is where the EVMs have failed, and it will continue to fail because, given the fact that these these equipments cannot be examined by the public, cannot be examined by the judiciary when it is rigged. Which is why, if you look at the Haryana elections, and I'm talking from a point of view, if you looked at the social media platforms, you had lakhs of people coming and attending opposition rallies. And
yes.
do you say overnight, in a span of 2 weeks, they went and chose another, the ruling party is difficult to digest. As somebody put it, the results are inorganic. And this is a great threat to democracy. If the public now feels, as it's happening in many parts of Maharashtra, that they feel that the elections is rigged, then that is an existential threat to democracy. And it is absolutely essential that whatever is the system which is being followed has to involve the credibility, and the people of the country should feel that they participated in a credible election. Only then
Absolutely.
a democracy can sustain.
Absolutely.
And there is
Which,
one more point I want to make. The question of VVPAT scrutiny is, is abysmal. In statistical terms, 5% constitutes nothing. In an election, in a democracy, to gain any legitimacy, you must have 100% scrutiny. Otherwise, it is not a legitimate election. Even if you have 95% and there is a 5% which is not scrutinized, then it is not a legitimate election as envisaged in the Constitution and as envisaged by the makers of this Constitution.
absolutely. Which now brings me to the second question that I want to pose to you today. That's the legal side of it. So, as per the judgments of the Supreme Court, they haven't really given a carte blanche to ECI. Yet the ECI repeatedly quotes Supreme Court to absolve itself of any wrongdoing. So, why is this happening? And why is there no measure taken to fight this disinformation from the ECI?
See, as I told you, the fundamental problem. Now, the last two elections, assembly elections, there is a feeling that the results are not organic. The results are contrived. That is the feeling. Now, the difficulty arises when the court is seized of the matter and pronounces upon it. What they found was that certain steps are there, and that is good enough to guarantee a free and fair election. But what the court did not look into is the fact that they themselves, with all the knowledge at their command, cannot know if the machine is rigged. Let us take an election takes place today in Delhi, and the machine is brought before the court. The court will be unable to tell whether the machine is rigged or not.
Yes.
It is impossible. It is impossible for the public to know it. It is impossible for the political participants who are undergoing this election process and contesting it. They are unable to know it, and the court also will not know it. There lies the fundamental flaw in the judgments. But there are three of the Supreme Court judgments which do not deal with that public examinability issue. And that is a serious flaw both in the judgment and now the manner in which the Election Commission of India is carrying out even the mandates which were given to it. They are failing to do it. For instance, you have after the elections between 5 and 11 p.m., there is an increase in voter percentage. How does that happen? You have a machine, it is recording the number of votes, it is displaying how many votes were cast. How can there be a change between 5 and 11 p.m.? And the change is not
Yes.
small, it is almost 7 to 8%, which is shocking, which is absolutely shocking. With 7 to 8%, why even 1% and 2% can change an election result? And 7 and 8% means this is a very flawed process. And the Election Commission has not come up with any credible explanation. One way out, though I am not fully in sync with it, is the fact of 100% VVPAT verification. If there was
Yes.
100% VVPAT verification, you have all the VVPATs there. And it is far easier to count a VVPAT than a ballot because on a ballot, there may be 20, 30, maybe even 50 candidates. Then you will see whether the particular candidate belongs to which party and you disclose it orally and somebody records it. And whether it was a tick, it is an X, what is permitted, what is not permitted, all these issues will crop up. But on a VVPAT, it is the simplest way to verify because here you have Mr. X party and here is Y party. If either it goes to Y party, it goes into a box. It goes into the X party, it goes into another box. It's the simplest way. In fact, it is far easier to count VVPATs 100% than any of this what is going on.
No,
And
absolutely.
this is a big failure. This is a big failure, and this will forever dog the elections here, and which will undermine the sanctity of elections.
No, what is really surprising, sir, the Election Commission of India is obstinately stubborn. I mean, it's beyond stubborn about there being no amount of scrutiny from the public. It's not that civic society has not tried. It's not that the political parties have not tried. People have asked for there to be a demo, for there to be an open contest, in front of the media, that you show us how the machine works, and we will, demonstrate to you how what happens and everything. But the ECI is not ready to even, speak to civic society or speak to political parties. So it's a complete deadlock in a democracy, which is highly reprehensible, I would say.
The election commission's conduct has been dismal,
Yeah.
to say the least. It is absolutely dismal. Not subjecting the election, the what do you call the EVMs to public scrutiny is a serious flaw. Two,
Yes.
not allowing or not having norms of 100% VVPAT checkup is again a very serious flaw. So, on every front, then you have a post voting increase in percentages, again, an extremely serious flaw. Then there are EVM machines having 99% charge when other EVMs have discharged 66 and they have only 66% battery. These are all extremely, I would say, distressing. And these signals are indicative that the election commission is not being transparent. And therefore, if the election commission does not get transparent and does not promote transparency in the election process, then there is bound to be serious questions on the sanctity and integrity of the elections itself.
Absolutely, without a doubt. Brings me to the next question, sir. What are your views on the other forms of electoral manipulation that we've witnessed, like voter suppression, deletion of names from the electoral list, post poll percentage hikes that you've just mentioned? These are all very serious concerns because it's not just the EVM that is in question right now. There is the before, the during, and the after of the election. All three stages are in question at the moment. So, what are your views on this?
See, here I will trace back to the decision of the Supreme Court, which said that there will be three participants in choosing an election commissioner. That was the prevailing judgment which a statute seeks to replace, by virtue of which it is only the government which has the decisive and only viewpoint on who will be the election commissioner. And which is why you find there have been across the board in several places voter suppression, deletion of names. These are serious concerns. And if these things go on and the courts are not able to deal with it, then we fall on the democracy index, and which has happened in our case.
Yes.
And voter suppression, see, today we live in an age of social media. You can actually see what is going on. In Uttar Pradesh, what happened? It was visible by several video clips. In Maharashtra,
Yes.
they have produced large chunks of names which have been eliminated from the list. I mean, these are very, very serious concerns. And the ECI is not acting independently, and they have failed to give any sense of confidence amongst the people, both in the Haryana elections, Maharashtra elections, and the particular elections which went on in Uttar Pradesh. And a voter suppression, deletion of names from the list, if these cannot be addressed and redressed by the courts, then I think we are facing a serious crisis of confidence on the entire electoral process.
Absolutely. I would like to add a question to this, whatever I asked you, that, Form 7C is being extremely misused by partisan vested interests to delete voters from the electoral list, especially those from the minority, whether it be the Muslims, the Christians, and other minorities. There is a concerted effort to take away the voting rights of the people. Now, in this scenario, for me, I've done my bachelor's in public administration. I know a
Yes.
little bit about the constitution. The election is a fundamental bellwether of democracy. Now, if in that process you are denying the rights to your own citizens, of certain segments of your population, is shouldn't the court be taking suo moto cognizance of this fact and actually take action when the ECI is failing to do so?
I entirely agree with you because, in fact, see, when you have an election, even in a small state, you have hundreds of polling booths. You have voters lists, and people find that they've been deleted from the voters list in this age, you should be able to put it up on a public platform, your voter list, so that people can come and redress it before the election. It cannot be that I go to vote and find, one chunk belonging to this particular community in this particular area, their entire names are gone. And then an election takes place and somebody is already installed in power. So there has to be a mechanism which has to be created whereby this electoral roll should be available for public scrutiny. And it is so easy in today's date to put it up on a public platform. It's not difficult. They need not man an office. They need not have lists all over the constituency. It can be simply uploaded and everybody can see it for themselves. And there should be a mechanism of redressing it.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
do, and this perhaps will lie from the fact that the courts will have to now intervene because the election commission has miserably failed to inspire any confidence, which is why you had in that particular village, they wanted to have a ballot. And how do you suppress that? You actually have a curfew. I mean, it is showing something, a side of democracy which is not palatable to the constitution.
I mean, here are people who actually believe in the concept of democracy and wanted to exercise, not even in the official capacity, just for their own satisfaction, a poll to understand what really happened. And you are
Yeah.
suppressing even that right. I mean, I find it extremely funny, but at the
Hmm.
same time so insidious that what are they so afraid of?
See, this is an empirical study. That's all. It's an
Yeah,
empirical scientific study in the field of social behavior. That is all that that village was trying to exercise. And you have a curfew to prevent that from happening. What was there to conceal? Assuming even if the results were different, it is for the government to take into account why were the results different when votes were
yes,
polled on a ballot on an experimental basis as against an EVM. Then it is for the government of the day, the election commission of the day, to see whether there was in fact a problem with the EVMs. But that is not what has happened. You impose a curfew and you prevent a social empirical experiment, which again is absolutely not in consonance with our constitutional ethos. It is not in consonance with our constitution because our constitution also guarantees us free speech and that is what that village in Maharashtra was trying to exercise. They were trying to tell, listen, here we are conducting a social experiment and we want to know the truth. It is an expression
yes.
of free speech so that whatever other problems can be resolved. You don't suppress it with a curfew.
Absolutely. And so now is the government also going to get into elections of, like, say, professional associations and all other bodies where, or in colonies where they have elections and voting happening? I mean, it seems extremely idiotic. Sorry for my language, but it just doesn't make any sense to me at all.
In fact, in our bar association elections, we have a ballot. In our society, in the elections in the society, we have ballots. Why? We can have an iPad and people can go and press something and no, you don't trust that mechanism. You follow the paper ballot. And if you are exercising paper ballot for want of confidence in bar association elections, in housing society elections, how is it that you allow an electronic voting on a national scale where so much is at stake and where it has been repeatedly told that public examinability is critical, and that is something which this system simply cannot work out.
Absolutely. But brings me to the last question that I want to address with you. um, in the midst of whatever we've discussed, ultimately, what is the legal recourse to the stonewalling by ECI? Even the Supreme Court refuses to hear matters on EVMs now. So, where should the public go in this situation for a recourse?
See, the Supreme Court not entertaining issues on EVM, in my opinion, is not correct. I consider this as a continuing mandamus. Mandamus means a direction of a court to a public authority to do X or Y in consonance with statutes or the Constitution. Now, that does not get over because one decision came in favor of the Election Commission of India. This is a continuing mandamus. It will continue to be a continuing mandamus. For instance, you have the courts monitoring the forests in India. Can it be, oh, we have decided it, now we don't have to be bothered about the forests? No, it is a continuous exercise. You will have to monitor it forever, that
Yes.
people are not encroaching into the forest, people are not causing environmental degradation, public policies do not, address issues like climate change. The courts have to continuously issue mandamus. The If the courts are refusing to do it, I think there is a serious flaw in the understanding of the nature of the problem. This will be a continuing mandamus. It has to be.
Yes.
It cannot be because technology is moving at such a pace. When the first petition before the EVM on the EVM issue was argued, Pegasus was not there. When the third matter was being argued, the third EVM matter came up before the Supreme Court, before the last general elections. The entire potential of hacking and manipulation via Pegasus was now open to the public.
Yes.
Then today, after the general elections, we see in Lebanon some devices can be exploded, which are
Remotely.
300-400 miles away. They can be exploded by an electronic signal which is situated far, far away from the place where the equipment is lying. So these are, see, the technology is moving at such a pace to say that we will not look into it any further is simply not a tenable way of judicial scrutiny of elections. In my opinion, judicial scrutiny of elections is a continuing mandamus, it is a continuing cause of action, and it will have to, for ultimately get involved in this whole issue. And most important, we will have to decide on the question of the constitution of the election commission minus the chief justice of India minus the opposition leader. That is fundamental. In fact, the idea of an independent election commission was kept in mind by our constitution framers because impartial elections is the sine qua non of a democracy. That is why an
Absolutely.
independent public commission, and that is why the Supreme Court pronounced that you need the leader of the opposition, you need the chief justice in the selection process. If they two are eliminated, then there is a serious problem, which we are now actually encountering and witnessing election after election. That is a fundamental thing which has to be addressed and redressed.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a basic principle of separation of powers. You cannot have the executive overly involved in, the formation or the appointment of officials in different independent institutions like the ECI. So that itself, I mean, uh, every aspect of democracy. I mean, I with this regime, I don't know what to say beyond a point.
See,
Every
I'll give you an example. In the manufacture of the EVM machine,
Yeah.
you have members of a political party, not one and two, four of them sitting in that board of directors. It is astounding that they sit there in the board of directors of a company which is manufacturing EVMs. There is a fundamental flaw here because you are directly interested in a certain outcome. And you cannot be given the task of making a machine and you will have members of one political party being on the board of directors. It is unheard of. I mean, it is fundamentally flawed.
Absolutely. Also, just wanted to quickly address this aspect with you. To me, when I think about this and I'm looking at arguments from the ECI, on the one hand, they say that the pros of using EVMs is efficiency. All right, okay, we understand. But if you are taking the support of that reason of efficiency, on the other hand, you have the post poll percentage hike. So how is the machine efficient, and at the same time there is a huge difference in the percentage polled at 5 p.m. Then a different percentage it hikes up at 11 p.m. and by the next day it's even higher. So there is a lot of cognitive dissonance even in the arguments from the ECI. What do you say about this?
See, both the arguments are flawed. The argument saying this is an efficient mechanism is flawed. The argument saying that integrity does not get compromised by this system is flawed. Now, I'm going back to the ballot. We conducted elections for over 65, 70 years with the ballots.
Yes.
What is so different today than when we conducted elections by ballots? And when the ballot system, one thing, there were flaws in it, there is no doubt about it. People used to capture votes, etc. All those problems were there. But the fact is, the ballot was subject to scrutiny. You could go back, count it. You could go back and see it. Today,
Yes.
you are going to press a button and see. If you want to recount, you just go back and hit the buttons and find out who won. Once again, you don't know what's going on in that machine. Nobody can see it, nobody can feel it, nobody can hear it.
Yes.
And on an electronic signal, you will say, no, this person won. So, in terms of efficiency, there is no substitute for a ballot, because the ballot ensures one thing, that we can go back, we can revisit that issue and take a decision on it. It is
Yes.
subject to public accountability, it is subject to judicial scrutiny, which in this particular case, as the German Constitutional Court said, there is none of it here. Second is the
Absolutely.
integrity of the elections, which, as you say, if this is such a fantastic system, how is it that there is a discrepancy at 5 p.m. and then you find the poll percentages have increased right up to 7 and 8% in a matter of few hours? That means your systems are certainly not efficient either. So on both counts, you have failed. So the argument of the ECI, it is efficient, it ensures integrity, have been demonstrated to be false.
Absolutely. Without a moment of doubt. I mean, I when I saw the results in the Maharashtra elections, and even Dr. Parakala Prabhakar and several others pointed it out, how can you add? How have 76 lakh people ended up voting in a span of five
You
to
are
6 hours?
shocking.
It's humanly impossible.
In fact, Mr. Parkala had even demonstrated how much time it takes to vote. And even if
Yes,
you go by that, it just doesn't make mathematical sense in what you're trying to tell the public. So that the
absolutely.
fact that the opposition parties are now demanding that it has to be by the ballot is absolutely legitimate. It is a legitimate demand, and it is a demand in consonance with the constitution of this country.
Absolutely, without a doubt. And before we end today, I just wanted to also quickly address, one more aspect of where the ECI is feeling is during the model code of conduct. We saw it during the Lok Sabha elections. I mean, there is not a single election that goes by without violations of the MCC, and multiple of them not only across the election process, but multiple violations in a single day. So, from the Banswada speech in Rajasthan, I mean, the Lok Sabha election was marred with multiple violations of the MCC by the Bharatiya Janata Party, by a sitting prime minister, by several cabinet ministers, and yet we see absolute silence from the ECI. Yet they are extremely quick on the gun to take action against the opposition parties. I didn't see
See,
again any action from the judiciary on this.
see, which is why I said the fundamental flaw which we are faced with is a partisan election commission of India. That is the fundamental flaw. And how was that effected? When the Supreme Court said your selection of election commission must necessarily involve other participants as well. And you, by a statute, just before the elections, eliminate those two components, which would have ensured impartiality in the selection of the candidate. Today, an election commission is beholden to the government because he knows
Yes.
it is only the government which decides his appointment, nobody else. So you have an election commission, he is completely, he knows that the person who appointed him and he has to show obeisance to that person or that political formation or that political party. There is no other component in his selection. Here lies the fundamental problem. Unless the selection of the election commission is impartial, and that could have been effected only by virtue of the judgment of the Supreme Court on this. Once you took away the non-partisanship in the appointment process, he becomes a cog in the wheel of a political machinery. He is
Absolutely.
no longer an impartial component to ensure a free and fair election, which is why you are seeing at every stage you find all kinds of problems which you just now described, which
Yes.
if he knew that he is subject to appointment, he is subject to control by another body and not the political formation in power, then the issues which you raise right now would have been controlled or redressed in some manner or the other. But here, nothing of that sort happens.
But sir, isn't the judiciary also failing in this respect?
No, the matter is before the court. This act is under challenge, and it is coming up probably in a week or two after the reopening in January. So the constitutionality of the act will once again be subject of scrutiny, and we hope and pray that the court understands the full manifestation of this problem because it is undermining
But
democracy in a big way, as you illustrated
absolutely.
time and time again.
Yeah. I mean, but also, sir, Rajiv Kumar, uh,
Mm.
this one of the CECs, he was appointed using the older methodology where the CGI was part of the decision making process. The two other CECs are via the new process where there are two. I mean, two people from the executive, the prime minister and one cabinet minister. So, but yet you see Rajiv Kumar, you know, behaving in the way that he does. What does it speak about the you know the involvement of the previous CGI who was part of that process of bringing the CEC into position?
See, I'll tell you. See, human conduct, of course, as you rightly say, a person of integrity huh, should follow the course of integrity right through his career. A person of a person who is determined to uphold the Constitution, if that is his nature, he should uphold the Constitution. But human behavior is often does not follow that pattern. It is often dictated by who is in power and who exercises some control over you, which is why you had a situation where one of the dissenting members of the election commission left. There is no reasons given, no explanations given. He left. Now, this the fact that the election commissioner has been appointed under the previous regime, but he did nothing thereafter, shows that it is all the more necessary to strengthen the control mechanism of ECI and it has to be shifted from the government to a larger body, a representative body, where government is not the sole or a manifestly determining component.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
that is one way. But I remember when the argument on the NJSC was going on in the Supreme Court, the one of the judges, I remember him telling, you see, when you go looking for a groom for your daughter, you look into all the considerations. You look into the consideration of his income, his education, his background, his character, and his family, and everything. And yet things can go wrong, And this is one such case, as I see it.
Yes.
But the solution, as I still say, is that this appointment process must be shifted. That is one very integral component which requires to be looked into and, in my opinion, incorporated. Otherwise, you will have this problem time and time again.
Absolutely.
And there should be also post-retirement, putting him in here, putting him there. All these things also will have to go because these are all carrots for conduct, for deviant conduct.
Absolutely. There has to be an enforceable cooling off period for everybody in the judiciary, in all other institutions. There has to be a mandatory cool off period, and they cannot immediately go into a political party or contest elections. That is otherwise everybody is working for favors. Where is then democracy
Absolutely,
going to be
absolutely,
protected?
and we have very so many instances in the judiciary, which is now you find people talking in a manner which they shouldn't be.
Yeah,
It is
Mr.
not at all
Gogoi is an
healthy for
example.
a constitutional democracy to be talking in those terms. But if the
Yes.
conduct of some of the members of the judiciary in accepting post-retirement, offices happens, then it is unfortunate that they will forever be judged for what they wrote by the
Absolutely.
office they are occupying today. That is the tragedy, and that's a tragedy for a democracy, in my opinion.
I couldn't agree more. I think somewhere in my mind, I'm expecting any day to hear news about. I'm sorry to say, but the past CGI, Mr. Chandrachud. I would not be surprised to hear him becoming part of this regime or their party or getting a position. Almost expecting it. Almost expecting it.
See, that very thought in your mind or in the mind of the public is, I think, it's a sad day for our constitutional democracy, which in my opinion did so outstandingly well. You see, if you look at the entire political development in the post-colonial regimes which came in and post-colonial constitutions, every constitution was destroyed or torn to shreds. And here we stood by this constitution. And we will stand by this constitution only if people of integrity man the institutions formed
Absolutely.
by this constitution. It will all forever be determined by the people who man it and
Absolutely.
by their conduct.
Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's words. When
Yes,
you say this, it reminds
he
me of his words.
in fact, wherever I go, I say one thing. Dr. Ambedkar's last speech in November to the Constituent Assembly should be a text for any course that you do in any field. If you're studying engineering, you still got to read that last speech of Dr. Ambedkar. because he's not talking to an audience of 1947. He's talking to an audience of 2024 also. That
Yes,
speech is addressing you and me as well. And that has to be taught, irrespective of what discipline you're studying, what discipline you're specializing. It should be inculcated into the society.
absolutely. Without a doubt. Thank you so much, Mr. Advocate Paul, for joining us and sharing your take on the EVMs and a whole lot more that we have discussed today. And it's been an absolute honor and pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and I wish you all the very best, and the audience all the very best. And let's hope and pray we are able to continue this long innings of our Constitution, which has survived for 70, is not survived, thrived to a great extent in these 75 years when we saw constitutions across the globe in the post colonial world collapsing one after the other. So I hope and pray that your programs enlighten the people of India and also the policymakers in all
Thank
forms
you.
of government. Thank you so much. All
Thank
the
you
very
so
best.
much. Thank you. And to all the viewers who watched this segment today, please do show your support to the channel by liking, commenting, and sharing with like minded people who would love to hear about what we've discussed today. Your support means a lot to me, and it will go a long way in spreading conversations that really matter for our democracy. We are a fledgling, small channel right now, but your support will make us grow. So I hope you will show your support by subscribing to the channel, and do tune in whenever we go live next for more such conversations. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.